buddy. I don't know if I should call you by your
Yeah,
name
sure.
here or not.
Sorry, I was here for the trolling. But I'll explain myself. Sure. I'm what's called a natural law theorist, and I just don't like naturalism as a concept. I'm not sure it's super well formed, but that's what I would call myself, natural law theory. So it goes way back, goes back
And
to
by,
Aristotle, that sort of thing.
and by moral
Um,
and by moral realism, do you take it that your view is um, that morals are stance independent?
yeah. So give it on a certain value of stance independence, I suppose. So I think on my view, moral facts are rooted in objective facts about the human constitution and its interests, which are not sort of which are not relative to subjective commitment, right? So I can be subjectively commitment to having interests which I don't in fact have, and so forth. So in that sense, it sounds independent. And I think that's the
Wait,
sense that most people want to talk about
hold on,
stance
hold on, hold on,
independence.
hold on, hold on.
Yeah. Sorry.
Let me
Yeah. Go on.
wait. You said a lot of things really quickly. I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand.
Sorry. Yeah. No
Um,
worries.
yeah. So what the sort of thing I'm looking for is
Yeah.
when I say morals, the thing I'm not talking about there is I'm not talking about the sort of thing where like you know we can like collectively agree on like the
Mm.
laws of the rules of chess, but once we agree on the rules of chess, there's like some stance
Yeah.
independent like, correct move. I'm not talking about that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. I'm not talking about that either.
yeah,
So
okay, cool.
that's right.
Yeah,
We're on the
I'm
same page
talking
there.
about the
Yeah.
sort of thing that says like the rules of chess itself are stance independent, like without agreement, without convention. Like that's the sort of thing. Like there is
Yeah.
some stance independent um,
Yeah.
moral fact. There's a stance independent. Um, there's stance independent good things and stance independent bad things. Um, that's the sort of thing I'm asking if your view is.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, so my view is in fact what you were just saying. So it's not a matter of agreement, right? Not a matter of subjective agreement between people. I think that, sort of there are interests preceding our subjective commitments which we have, which aren't a matter of those subjective commitments, right?
So
So,
what
you
are
know,
the
for yeah.
so what are moral? So what are the stance independent? Like what is the stance? Like I because I don't understand what it really means. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, so let's talk about a stance dependent one first, because I think stance depend. So, hmm, let me think. What's the best way to approach this? So, think about stance dependent norms, for instance, right? What makes it a norm, even if it's a stance dependent one? It's that it is as a matter of choice, you choose some end with respect to which you're going to evaluate your actions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some sort of designated thing that you're trying to realize, some sort of teleology, as it were. So I think there's such a thing as a natural teleology, right? In the sense that there is we are constituted by certain dispositions for certain ends, and those ends constitute, therefore, natural norms for, say, human health, maybe, but specifically in the moral sphere, norms for human action, right? So to act as a human being is a certain kind of thing, right? Certain kind of objective thing. And so when you are fulfilling the norms of human action, you are acting well as a human being. And I don't think that whether you're acting well as a human being is a matter of subjective commitment.
Is this just to say that like statistically there's some average or certain normality to the way humans act, a certain normality to the types of goals humans have, and then that since that normality is not a matter of a stance dependent thing, that just actually is some objective thing, then that's the sort of thing that is moral, and that's the sort of thing you mean.
No. So I would say that like statistical likelihood sort of roughly tracks, but isn't the same thing as what I'm talking about. Because it might be the case, for instance, that everyone suffers from some like weakness or disease, right? So in that sense, what is sort of statistically the most likely is not sort of constitutionally the best sort of outcome. So
So
there might
what
be a
is
freak who's
what
actually better than everybody else rather than
what
just the
so what
normal.
Wait, but now you're invoking a term I don't understand on your view, because you're saying what?
Sorry.
So that's not going to help me
Yeah,
understand the distinction between.
So maybe that was the wrong way to go about it. Maybe what I would say is that statistical probability doesn't track necessarily the constitutions of things, right? Whether there is and here's where the mereology comes in, right? Whether there's a sort of non-reducible sort of entity there, right? So maybe, for example, there's some sort of accidental correlation between myself and a parasite that lives on me, right? But it wouldn't necessarily at that point say, well, the parasite is a part of my constitution. It's still a parasite, still a distinct thing from me. What matters for discerning whether a thing is part of my constitution is not what's sort of statistically associated with me, but a matter of, well, what's necessary to like cause, to constitute my existence, to be my existence, right? So a certain kind of irreducibility, perhaps, like
You're
where
saying
if I sort of don't posit my existence, I would lose information at that point. Anyway, I'm sort of rambling at the moment, but do you
so
sort of get what I'm getting at?
Yeah, well, what I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna try to recapitulate your view to you.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so you're saying is that there are certain things that are necessary for your existence. I'm hesitant to invoke things like essential properties or whatnot. I'm not sure what your view on
Yeah,
those is.
that's pretty close to what I mean. That's fine. Yeah, talk about essential properties.
There are certain things that are essential properties for you to be you, or for humans to be humans, or for any person to be any
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And if you just take those things and what they would um, and construct like the humans that come out from them or whatever,
Yes.
there's going to be some sort of way that these people act. There's going to be some sort of goals that they have,
Yes.
and that now, and while each individual goal is stance dependent, the I'm hesitant to use statistical terms like average, or like the average summation of these goals, but I've already baked into the cake that we're just doing this based on essential properties. So I'm not sure if that would fix the issue or not. Because if I'm not doing, because here's the issue, like if I'm not invoking any statistical terminology here, then I'm not. So there may be another way to capture this, but because it seems like what you're trying to say is that, like, well, there's some summation of goals, like we can like summate some average type of goal that these would have, and that is what I mean by objective morality, because like that summation is like stance independent. What that summation would be based on these natural kinds. If you don't let me use that move, if you don't let me say like, okay, well, we average this goal or something like that, we're just left with individual particular goals. Those individual particular goals are going to be stance dependent. You can say, I suppose you can say, well, it's the sort of goals that would just be brought about by humans created just as their natural kinds, just as we posit whatever like necessary conditions for humans. I guess you could just say that. So, is that the sort of thing that you're saying? You're saying, well, if we just take if we just take these posited essential properties and we envision humans with these essential properties, the types of goals that these humans would have, there is a type of goals these humans would have. There's some fact of the matter, and that fact of the matter is not stance dependent. And so that's what.
Yeah, I suppose. I'm willing to go along with that for now. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Let's say I agree for that for now. I reserve the right to like make any adjustments that become evidently sort of necessary. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Would you object to that, or do you think there's something trivial about that?
I agree. That's not. Yeah. So I'm happy to grant that that's not stance dependent. That is there. If there was some fact of the matter about certain posited natural kinds or certain positive essential properties, and if there's a fact of the matter about what goals such creatures constructed with such essential properties would have. Yeah, that is that fact would be a stance-independent fact. It's just not so that wouldn't be the thing I'm talking about by stance-independent. I mean, it would be the thing I'm talking about by stance-independent, but that would just be some sort of any other sort of thing that I would consider stance independent. Like, yeah, there are certain things that would happen if we posit some initial conditions, and why I would care, why I feel any reason to care about such a thing. I mean, you can call that morality, but but that wouldn't strike me any differently as if you. I mean, it would strike me differently in some sense, but not in the sort of sense I'm talking about. If you were to just say, well, there's some statistical average. Like, I agree, there's a statistical average, but it's the problem with the statistical average that I have is the same sort of issue with the natural kind. Is just that, well, it's just like if you said morality is a river or a lake or a brain state or an average brain state. Yeah, I could grant those things are stance independent facts, but why should I care about any of that?
So my reason for why you should care is that if it's a correct description of what you are, then in a sense, you already do care, right? At least not in the sort of sense that, say, it may be subjectively accessible to you, but you have at least a constitutive disposition, right? That's some words maybe we can borrow into later. A constitutive disposition towards those ends, a real interest in those ends, which you have unbeknownst to you. And sort of everyone's had that experience of
That's
having interests
that's
which they don't fully understand. Like, a
that's just
child is sleepy, insists they're not sleepy. Parents can see that they actually are sleepy, and
wait, hold on, hold on.
eventually they can come to agree. Yeah.
So, but if the move is to just say, the reason I should care about it is because there's some tracking there with my own values, goals, and desires, then I'll agree that maybe is a tool to like help figure out my values, goals, and desires. But the reason I'm caring about it is just because of my stance independent values, goals, and desires. It's not because I'm caring about this.
Sorry, do you mean your stance dependent goals and desires? The reason you care about it is because your stance
Yeah,
dependent goals.
yeah, stance
Yeah. Okay.
dependent.
Great. Sorry, you said independent just
Sorry.
now, so I was just yeah.
Yeah, I may have misspoke. Yeah. So then,
Yeah.
look, yeah, if the move is to just say, well, this, this, whether it's a
Yeah.
statistical average or whether it's like some sort of positive natural kind, if the
Yeah.
move is to say, well, the reason I should care about this thing is because in some way, it's reflective of your values, goals, and desires. That's fine, but the reason I would care about that is just to the degree that it actually is reflective of my values, goals, and desires, and nothing more.
So yeah. So I think like what I would contend is that there's more to you than your subjectively accessible and subjectively committed um views, values, and desires. Those things are in a sense sort of how you say products of, right, your underlying objective essence. And insofar as they deviate from those things, they're not really of you, they're more like defects or or deviations from your real interests, right? So in that sense, I would say that, it's completely possible to have like a completely wrong idea of your own sort of actual interests and go through your life living that and then dying without ever actualizing your real interests, right? So suppose you've got a real interest in, as a physical being in bodily
No,
improvement and
that's
going to
fine.
the
That's
gym,
also fine.
and
That
then you
doesn't.
go, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's
So
fine too. But
yeah,
that's not. Wait.
so
I can explain how that doesn't interact.
yeah,
Yeah.
let me be quiet. Yeah, say your piece. Yeah,
Yeah. But when I said my values, goals, and desires, I'm including in that any
right.
subjective, like unrecognized values, goals, and desires. I'm not just saying like it has to be the consciously recognized ones. Like I'm leaving the
Right.
door open for there to be certain like unconsciously
Yes.
recognized ones, and I'm leaving the door open for there to be like a tool that would like help me
Yeah.
recognize that. But if it turns out that that tool is like let's just say it turned out that like the natural kind, whatever we posited this to be, just turned out to be like, okay, well, the correct thing, the essence here is to just stomp on babies. So if I, I could posit like, okay, maybe like there, upon reflection, I might realize that this is something about me. I reflect, it doesn't happen. I'm not getting it. Because I can, we can just say, even if there is some like, natural kind about humans, it doesn't mean my values, goals, and desires, unrecognized, are all going to be there of this, that, and natural. And I don't see an argument for that. It's not, unless you like have some argument that these, and to whatever there is an argument for that, would just be to say the point that those are just my stance dependent values, goals, and desires. So
yeah, well, yes. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The whole point here is then, it's just the reason to whatever degree I should care about this thing is just the degree to which those are my stance dependent values, goals, and desires. Recognized or not.
Yeah, so yeah, okay. So that's actually fine by me. So again, if the you that we're talking about, right, which has these sense, it is in fact the human being as I posit him, then that is a way of, okay, so sorry, hold on. So we are agreed. So what's interesting to me is that if you accept this sort of reasoning, that actually puts you on the same side as like canonical moral realists like, Plato and Aristotle and Kant. So I'm sort of wondering
Wait a minute,
where
wait,
at
hold
this
on,
point
hold on,
where the yeah.
wait, before you say that.
Yeah.
So just to be clear on what my view is what
Yeah.
Morals are stance dependent. Morals
Right.
are, yeah, they are stance dependent.
Yeah. Yeah, great. But if what you mean by stance dependent takes into account the stance constituted by these sort of unconscious underlying interests,
if
right,
they
which
are
might take
if they are actually present in me, like
yeah,
which,
sure. And yeah. Yeah, and guys, it's like, so let's take Kant for instance. Kant would say, well, the desire to sort of obey the categorical imperative is inherent in you in virtue of your being a rational agent, right? That's how his whole morality works. It's like, why do these norms apply to you? They apply to you because those are the norms that the rational agent, insofar as it is a rational agent, would choose to follow as a result of that, what it is to be a rational agent, right? The preconditions of rational agency. So he's not going to talk to you insofar as you have certain hobbies or insofar as you hate certain groups of people or whatever. No, he's talking to the rational agent in you. That rational agent is the only one that's susceptible of persuasion in the first place. And insofar as you are a rational agent, these norms ought to apply. And that's where all of his arguments come from, right? And in the sense that there are these norms to which you can appeal
wait,
through
hold
reason,
on, wait, that
that he
last
can
move,
hold you to.
wait, that last move
Yeah,
right there.
yeah,
Insofar as you are this rational agent, or insofar as you are this natural kind,
yeah,
that's what these norms would be for you if that's what you are. Now, that's
yes,
not the sort of thing I'd sign. Now, so I don't take that to be objective morality. I just take morality. I take it to be objective morality, but what I take morality to be is just for me, is just what's subjective in me, whether I am that or not. So if you're going to posit a natural kind and I just happen to not fit that, what I'm just going to say is that, well, that's just not reflective of morality to me. And you could say, well, that makes, that just, you're not a human then, or you're not this, or you're not rational, or whatever.
well,
Like,
yeah.
you can say all
Well, you're
those,
not.
whatever you
Yeah.
want. But,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that's
it's similar to what happens like with the troll that we've just had, right? That guy's not engaging you as a rational agent. He's engaging you as some kind of defective specimen. Like you can see the rational agent in there. Like he wouldn't be able to even talk at all if he wasn't a rational agent of some kind, right? But he's obviously not engaging that. He's acting in a defective way with regard to his
no,
rational agency.
I get it.
So
I
quite
get
rightly,
the
yeah.
point. No,
So
I
quite,
get the
yeah,
analogy, but
yeah,
the response is the same though. The response is just that, look, the whole purpose, the only reason why I would care about it is if it's a tool that can let me uncover uh, certain unrealized values that I may have and not realize. But if it turns out that I don't have such unrealized values, well, that's not going to motivate me in any way
yeah.
to like say those values of this natural kind are in any way
Yeah, well, the
or,
argument would be,
or would
oh,
even
sorry.
help me understand like what the like beyond just saying that there's some like in the same way that there's some statistical average.
Well, I would say, and similar people who argue along similar lines would say that in virtue of having that natural kind, you also have like it's analytic, I suppose you might say that it's or at least argue, according to
Seems
the argument, if the
seems
argument succeeds,
very
it's going to be
very-
analytic that you have these interests, right? So
wait,
say, for
wait,
example, as
hold-
a
wait.
yeah,
I get it.
go
Look,
on.
we could do the branch
Yeah,
right now. Look, if
yeah.
it's analytic, then it's either gonna that I have these values, um, and and I don't, then I'm just gonna say I reject the analytic. I reject the analytic relation.
Yeah,
If
sure.
yeah, if it's empirical, then and I don't, uh, well, similar story. I just
Sorry, what's analytic is that these values belong to this kind. What's empirical is whether in fact you belong to the kind, right? So
right.
we can say, well, someone says humans are rational animals, and you go, well, hold on, that doesn't accord with our experience of things, right? This kind doesn't actually inhere in the agents that we encounter day to day. Therefore, this kind and its interests don't belong to you. So that side of it is empirical. But what it would be what would the analytical side of it would be, well, given that you are, for example, a biological organism which is constituted precisely by certain dispositions toward life and growth and reproduction, insofar as you are a biological agent, life and growth and reproduction are your interests, right? Even if you
But
thought not, even if
they're
you were
not,
inclined towards suicide, yeah.
well, they're not your interests. They're the interest of your natural kind.
Well, I think that
They may not be.
if there is a natural kind which is constitutive of you, then you are that thing, right? That's the whole.
Wait, hold on,
That's the
wait.
yeah.
You agree that there could be biological organisms that are not interested. Maybe you're using the word interest in a different sense that I am.
Yeah.
That's probably what it is. Yeah. So if by interest you're just saying, well, by interest I just mean the natural kind sense of interest, then sure. But then the problem
Yeah,
is that
the opposite of a disposition. Yeah.
yeah, and by disposition you mean the natural kind sense, not the disposition of a
Yeah.
particular organism which may have a different disposition. Yeah, but if you're going to do that,
Well,
then but if that's the move you're going to make, then the reply is just going to be, well, maybe this organism is not part of this natural kind, and if I'm not part of that kind that you're positing empirically, then I have no reason to care about any of
yeah,
it.
I agree. So if it turned out that you were not, for example, actually a living thing or not actually a rational animal, or at least living thing or rational animal as I would define it, then again, those norms turned out wouldn't apply, right? But as far as like whether it's intelligible that there is such a thing as objective morality, like that's actually an intelligible question to ask about objective reality. Do
No,
these
no, no.
kinds and the
So the
dispositions
whole
apply? Yeah.
intelligible, the by the way, I don't take a step like the intel. The things I'm not saying that all views of objective morality are unintelligible. What I'm saying is they're either
Mm.
they fall into different categories. They're either unintelligible or they're intelligible, but the type of concept I get is like the sort of thing I'm like, oh well, so the fuck what? Like it's like they're intelligible, but I don't feel any motivation to give a shit about what's being posited. That's like
Yeah.
at least one
Yeah.
of the
Okay.
discounts. Yeah, so like
Sure.
that
Yeah.
sort of thing, like yeah.
Yeah.
So for example, if someone said, there is like by objective morality, I mean a rock. It's like, okay, well, I get that rocks are eligible. I
Yeah.
understand that. I just don't care.
Sure.
And yeah, and so if what you
Yeah.
mean by objective morality is just that, well, there's a certain archetype here, we can call it natural kind. We can posit some essential properties that form some natural kind, and that the natural kind is going to have some dispositions, and if you are a member of this natural kind, meaning that you happen to have the dispositions that they have, then you would have these dispositions too. So, um,
Mm.
well, I
Yeah.
agree with all that, but
Okay.
what if I don't? But what if I don't? Then who cares? Like,
Well, what if I don't? So I don't think that anyone who's a
what if I'm
moral
not a member
realist
of
is
that
going to
natural
say
kind?
that. Sorry?
What if I'm empirically not a member?
I mean, if you're empirical, then you're empirically not a member. I mean,
So then why
congratulations, liberation from the human race,
wait, no, no,
But
no,
I
no,
think you are. I think you are such a member. So I will make the case to you.
no, then you wait. Did you just say that then I'm not a member of the human race?
Well, yeah.
Is
If
that
I
what
think what it is to,
I'm
if I
gonna
think what it is to be human,
yeah, but
sorry.
then
So if I think what it is to be human is to be a member of this natural kind,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And
So
it turns out that you say you're a simulation of a human being or
no, I
whatever.
get it, I get it, I get it. You
Yeah,
don't have to say more.
yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So if you're gonna say, well, then you're just not like the. If you're gonna go for some rhetorical move, like or some optical move, say, well, then you're just not a member of the human. Then I take that to be very disingenuous because there's different senses of what it means to be a human, and so I'm gonna say, well, by your sense of being a part of the human race, meaning, well,
Mhm.
I'm just a member of this natural kind that happens to have these dispositions, meaning that I actually have these unrecognized values that this natural kind, as you posited in this analytic relation. Sure, I'm gonna say, yeah, then I'm gonna say by that definition of human race, fuck no, I'm not a member of the human race, and why should I care about not being a member of the human race as you've defined it?
Well, okay.
Hey,
So, you know, I think
define
there's two responses there. A, I'm not a member of the human race as you've described, in which case, you know, my response to that would be, well, here are the arguments for why you are, you know. And the second thing is, well, why should I care even if
That's
I am?
empirical. Then you have empirical work there.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. So I think
But
that
then you have
morality really
evidence.
requires engagement with what we actually are. You know, we need to actually look
And
at
then,
what we are and figure out, yeah.
yeah, then present. Then it's going to be on you to present the evidence.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there's much more to say, you know, about what grounds we have for thinking that we are rational animals, for
No.
instance.
Not we.
You
So
know,
me.
things like
I'm
that.
just like I'm not saying like we broadly. I'm saying me specifically. Like not and by So what I'm interested in is um. So the thing I'm interested in
Hmm.
um is the empirical case for um. Well, let me make 2 points. So the first thing is that even if it turned out the empirical case actually went through, like even if it went
Hmm.
through, I still would only care about it because it's like a tool for me to uncover my values. It's not like I would care about it because it's like some objective thing uh, of morals in and of itself. It's just like I would just care about it as some objective epistemic tool. That's the only reason.
Well, this
Like if it was a machine,
so
like
your values. So you when you say, you know, if that were true,
Mhm.
then it would still only be a tool for figuring out my values. You're sort of presuming that there is an
That's not what
intelligible
I said.
sense of you
Excuse me.
apart from.
That's not what I
Well,
said. I'll be
okay, okay, go on.
I said the only
Yep.
reason I would care about it, not that only
Hmm.
it's the only thing it is. I said the only reason I would care about it is because I happen to have the value of caring about my unrecognized values. If I didn't have the value of caring about my unrecognized values, I wouldn't care about it.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, hold on. I'm trying to figure out where we are in the dialectic here. So if
So
you didn't have the value of,
there's two
yeah,
points. The first point
yeah,
is even if the empirical case goes, so there's a principled point
mm,
and an empirical point. So the
yeah,
principled point is that even if the empirics all work out, which have yet to be
yeah,
demonstrated, but even if they do, the only
hmm,
reason I would care about such a thing is just to the degree that I would care about realizing that I would have the value, this stance dependent value of caring about my unrecognized stance dependent values in the first place. If I did not have such a value, I wouldn't care about such a thing.
so if you didn't care about it, you wouldn't care about it.
If I
Is
didn't
your point?
care, no, not I.
Yeah.
No, that's not that's disingenuous. If I, it's not that
Okay.
I didn't say if I didn't care about X, I wouldn't care about X. I'm not positing a tautology. What I'm
Yeah, yeah,
positing,
yeah. That's fine. Yeah.
yeah, what I'm positing is that
Mm.
if I didn't care, if I did, what I'm saying is if I didn't care about look, 'cause there's some people who don't care about their unrecognized values. It's not like some like entailed thing. Like I could very well just not care about my unrecognized values. I could say like, oh, well, maybe I do have some unrecognized values, but I just don't care about that. Or I only care about my recognized values.
Um, I don't think it's intelligence. Like, if you have those values, then to some, like, you know,
Like,
you, the actual bearer of interests,
mhm.
like, you know, you may not have a subjective care about them, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
actually do do
I have
have
a
some
yeah.
sort of commitment to them that's sort of
Mhm.
unrealized.
Yeah, and that would just
So
be
yeah, so if your
yeah.
point is just that people can have sort of subjective values that, you know, that can't be, so is your point that people can't be brought to care about their subjective values unless they
There are
already.
certain values. Maybe there may be certain values that may just stay non-recognized for the rest of a person's life. And
yes, okay, I can agree with that. Yep.
and yeah, so because I'm trying to answer the question why I would care about such a thing. Like that's the question.
Right. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
reason
Well. Yeah.
I have a clear reason why I would care about such a thing. Like the
Mm,
reason I care is because I recognize that I have a value, a stance dependent value, and this thing would, if the empirics worked out, would be a tool to help me accomplish one of my stance dependent values goals. If I didn't have that in the sense of a recognized value, um, I wouldn't be telling you this. I would just be like, oh, well, my answer would just be, well, no, maybe I shouldn't care about it. Because I wouldn't recognize even that value.
okay. Okay. Hold on. Sorry, I'm just trying to map it all out in my head so we don't go around the same bush.
Yeah.
Give me a sec. Hmm.
Let me make an analogy. It may help. So let's
Sorry, maybe let me. So you've done this to me before, so
yeah.
I think I thought it was very helpful. Then let me try and recapitulate your position to see if I understand it, so that
Mhm.
I can then sort of try to make my way around it.
Mhm.
So you're saying that, right? So even if the empirics worked out, even if I was to tell you what the essence of what it is to be you really was, and that this essence had along with it, interests that go along with it. Nevertheless, if you didn't care about, if you didn't sort of subjectively care about your essence, then you wouldn't be persuaded to adopt your essence, right? So
If I didn't
yeah,
care about it in at least some way that I could recognize it such that I would be persuaded
mm,
to adopt it and motivated. Yeah. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah, okay,
similar to like a machine,
yeah,
right? It's like if you
yeah,
if
yeah,
you're presenting me with a
yeah,
computer program basically and saying like, hey, this
yeah, sure,
computer program can like scan your brain and like tell you what your values are.
yeah,
Like that's great. That's
yeah,
great, but
yeah, sure, yeah,
that's not the sort of if that. But if you were to tell me, oh, by objective morality, I mean the computer program.
yeah,
Like okay, fine, but yeah, that's objective
yeah,
morality
sure,
in like some epistemic way that I can figure out my subjective
yeah,
morality.
sure.
Sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, but I don't know. So hold on. Right. So I don't think also like there is a route through your subjective preference, like to have subjective preferences as a subjective agent, right? Is precisely to have a sense of yourself, right? To be interested in yourself and what you as it were really want. Like to want something is to want to really want something, I suppose. Maybe that's a controversial claim. There's a kind of implicit higher order commitment there. But through that, like you can demonstrate, well, if as a subject you're interested in serving yourself, then you really ought to know, for instance, what you really are, right? And what yourself really is.
Not what
And
all of the
it's
things.
got to bring you to identify with your
It
real
depends
self,
on
as it were,
quantification.
would be a matter of
Right?
reason.
Yeah, so it depends on the
Yeah.
quantification. You may not need to know about all things about yourself. In fact, knowing certain things about yourself may not be. It could be the case that knowing everything about yourself may be detrimental to the goal of serving yourself. Maybe you only need to know certain things about yourself. Maybe it's optimal to only know this sort of quantity. I don't know. Neither do you. But to whatever degree, like it's just to what. Yeah, I mean, like if I mean, I could pause this right now. I mean, like it could very well be that recognizing all the things about myself is just too taxing on my brain and I wouldn't be able to serve myself. Maybe I only should be focusing on certain things. Not sure. Um, but yeah, so I don't think that this argument is going to, at least I don't think that's going to be a reason for me to say, okay, well, you know, this is an argument being delivered so that you should care about all of your unrecognized values. Um, well, maybe not. Maybe maybe it's not clear to me that if I didn't have the goal of caring about my unrecognized values, then the values that I currently have, recognizing all my other unrecognized values would somehow follow. That's not clear to me. I'd love to see an argument for that.
Yeah. Sorry, I've kind of gotten lost somewhere in the fray. I think I sort of get the gist. All right, sure. Let me think of a dialectical way forward. Um. hmm,
So where we are in the dialectic is just that,
Yeah.
yeah, what I see that you've posited to me in terms of why I should care about such a thing isn't
Yeah.
any different to me than a computer program that can be beneficial in scanning my brain and telling me what my unrecognized values are. And so I just take that to be so I just take that to be something that can help me understand my stance dependent values. And the only reason I care about that is either because I have the value of caring about my stance dependent values, or I have some other stance dependent value, and such a program would be instrumental in achieving that value. One of the two. So it just seems to be that you're positing something that is stance independent. You're giving it the label morally, but the only reason I'm caring about such a thing are the same things I'm talking about. It's just in service of the things that I'm talking about when I talk about morality, which is all the stance dependent things.
Yeah. So maybe it would help if I sort of saw like how I see what I'm doing when I'm trying to persuade you of say, that something is actually in your fundamental interest, right? So what I think I'm doing anyway is that I'm contending with, a certain, rational animal agent, right? That has a certain representation of themselves, which I'm trying to make more correct. And insofar as I can make it more correct, I will then be aligning their subjective self-representation with their objective nature and making them, therefore, as it were, more accurately themselves, right? I'd be shifting their values to better reflect what they
Index to the
objectively
natural
are.
kind. Yeah, index to all the natural
Yeah,
kind stuff that you've already
yeah,
posited.
sure,
Sure.
yeah,
Again, they're
yeah,
running into
right,
the same problem, but
yeah,
that's just going to run into the
yeah,
same
yeah,
problem.
sure, yeah. Yeah, sure. But like in that case, like, whatever other notion of subjectivity my interlocutor
Or
may
myself.
sort of want to yeah, or you. Yeah, but again, I'm just saying like this is how generally a natural law theorist approaches things, right? So, yeah. So, so whatever other kind of view of themselves the other person has, that insofar as it disagrees with sort of, the model I'm positing, that would be a sort of illusory or false or like non-existent sort of thing, even if it seems very real because, like people all have limited access to reality after all.
No.
So in that
No, it
yeah,
could be no, it could be granted. It could be granted that like there is this other deeper thing
yeah,
to this thing
yeah,
that you're
sure,
calling me.
yeah,
It's just that I'm
yeah,
using a different semantics when I call myself that, and
yeah,
these are the things and I just don't care about the thing that you're calling me.
sure, yeah, sure. And insofar as
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think there's probably a limit to how far like a difference like if you are, for example, self-oriented at all, and yet the self that you talk about is nothing to do with
The
what you
stuff that
really
you're
are.
talking
Like,
about,
yeah, then it seems to me like, it basically doesn't describe anything like in the world, right? Or, and if it doesn't describe anything in the world, it seems like, well, that's
no,
not
it's
what
describing.
anybody
It's
means
not that it's
by
not describing anything in the world. It's describing something in the world. Again, I'm granting, like
yeah.
we're granting the empirics. Like I'm granting that
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
okay, sure. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
okay, sure. Yeah.
It's
So
not
basically,
describing
yeah, so
different semantics being applied, and that
yeah.
the thing that you're, and that some of the things that are being described are not things that are things that I would care about in any sort of way that will be motivating for me or persuasive to me. And the reason for that is if I didn't have either a the stance dependent value to care about such things in and of
Yeah.
themselves, or the stance dependent values that are other values that it would be instrumental for.
Yeah, sure. So, if so then the question would be like, why is it not is it not motivating for you because of some sort of if you are sort of say a rational animal and you weren't motivated by the
We're
sort
going to
of
be
presentation,
keep in
this is
mind
why you aren't involved.
we're going to be
Like,
using we're going to be using
yeah,
different
yeah, sure. Yeah,
terminology.
so given that you understand what I'm talking about, I'm just using it from within my own view. So,
So
feel
just
free
so
to
I
make the
just so I
translations.
understand then,
Yeah.
when you say a rational animal, do you mean
Yeah.
someone that will
Have the
recognize-
nature of being a rational animal, have the natural
yeah,
kind of
but does that
yeah,
entail, so here's the key point then.
yeah,
So if this rational animal um, doesn't have the recognized goal,
yeah,
um, it doesn't have the recognized goal of recognizing their unrecognized goals, and
yes.
it doesn't have uh, any recognized goal for which such a thing would be instrumental for.
Mhm.
Are
Yeah,
is
okay.
there some
Yeah,
entailment
okay.
that
Yeah,
would be
sure.
motivated is
Yeah,
there
yeah,
then?
sure, yes. I agree. Yes, such a person would not be motivated. That's right. Yeah.
Oh,
But in
okay.
that case, like,
Wouldn't,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you would not be motivated in your sense, right? Wouldn't be subjectively motivated. Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, but in that sense, I would still say, well, here's a rational animal that's defective in an important way,
Yeah,
and
you're just calling.
even if reasoning with him is not the cure, even if sort of he can't bring himself for whatever reason to follow these reasons which sort of really illuminate what he really is, maybe there's some other cure, right? So even guys like, say Aristotle would say, you got to bring people up, right? Or else they won't have the kinds of subjective beliefs that allow them to succeed as what they really are, right? They'll pursue some false concept of self. They'll violate their own interests. And if we care about their interests, if
Yeah, yeah.
we as rational
And
care about their interests, yeah,
someone who's like that could just easily respond by saying, "No, no, I grant that on your sense of who I really am, that's just who I really am. I just have I use a different semantics of who I really am. By your
yeah,
semantics, dialing all that in, yep, that's who I really am. The empirics go through. I just see
yeah,
no reason to care about that by my understanding
yeah,
of reason, logic, and everything. Yeah, sure. Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah,
then
yeah.
agree that
Yeah, I agree. Some people like that could exist. Yeah,
okay, cool. So then we agree that
yeah,
yeah, and so then whatever
yeah,
for those so for someone like me, and by the way, I do
mm,
have a reason to care. I do see a reason to care about it.
yeah,
Because I do have the goal of recognizing my unrecognized goals. I'm not one of these people.
right.
But I'm just making the point that the reason I care about such a thing is just in virtue of the fact that I have such a goal, a stance dependent goal.
Yeah, well, I would say that, well, the reason you have that stance-dependent goal is ultimately because you are a rational animal of a certain kind under certain historical accidents that
Yeah, I
ultimately
mean
cause
that's
you to have
just
that belief.
saying, well, yeah, but
Yeah,
that's going to
yeah,
just be saying,
yeah,
well, you have certain the reason that's a causal
yeah,
explanation, right? That's not going to be the type of
yeah, sure.
yeah, but I don't want to equivocate there, right? It's not so that's not so I don't I'm not using the causal explanation sense. I'm talking about
Okay.
different yeah, I'm talking more of like an in service of relation. So like like an accomplishing to accomplish this goal this would happen like this goal is in service of that goal and it's in service of that goal if you're
Yeah.
going to say something like well the reason like so for example if I say I want to um I have the goal of getting food from the grocery store um because I'm hungry and I also have the goal of getting out of my apartment. And why do I have the goal of getting out of my apartment? Well, the only reason I have the goal of getting out of my apartment is because I want to go to the grocery store to get food. If
Right.
I
Yeah.
could get the food from the grocery store without getting out of my apartment, I wouldn't have had the goal from getting
Yeah,
out of my
sure. Yeah, okay. In service of.
apartment.
Yeah, great.
Things like
I understand that. Yeah.
reasons
Yeah, sure.
because of your brain structure. That's not the sort of thing I'm talking about. I'm not talking about
Right.
some
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that kind of relation then.
yeah.
Yeah, I think something similar sort of applies, right? So like, what is the ultimate end that I am well, what's the end of having what's the point of having like, the whatever subjective commitments I happen to have? Well, I think there is in Aristotelian terms, a final causal relation, in relation to it serves, or at least is an attempt to serve your underlying human nature in some sense, right? If you are a human being, then everything that you are stems from that nature, and so will either be an extension of or a rebellion against that underlying finality. And
Yeah.
if it
So the
is a
claim.
rebellion,
So
it's
then
not really, you don't really have it. It would
yeah,
be,
so then the claim
something else.
so then the claim is just that the claim would just be then that the reason you care about recognizing your um, the reason you care about recognizing your uh, unrecognized goals is because you
Mhm.
have some deeper stance dependent goal.
Um, I don't know. Like, so
Because here's the bottom line. Here, I'll come.
the deepest stance dependent goal that you're talking about
Mhm.
would, at least for me, be the goals of your natural kind or essence or whatever, right? That thing.
And that's is
Uh,
that's just to say that I fit this description. Then, like that's just like because your natural kind thing is just like it's an archetype. It's just describing something, and then whether I'm part of the kind
yeah,
or not is just whether I fit the description.
yeah. So
Yeah, but that's just to
so
say that
you'd be really a sort of a thing with a systematic, at least on my semantics, right, would be a thing with a sort of systematic resistance to pursuing its own interests.
yeah, but
And
that's just
I
to
don't know
say
if I need to be proving more than that to show that
Well,
there is such a thing as objective morality? Like, if I were to prove that,
well,
like,
well,
why would the fact that some people would just disagree, would just put their foot down and not agree,
wait.
why would that be a counterexample to what I
Yeah,
would be trying to prove?
I'm not giving you a counterexample. Remember, in
Yeah,
the whole point here is that I'm granting that you've provided something intelligible that stands independent, and you've labeled it with
yeah,
the term morality.
okay,
Um, the where we are in the dialectic is why I should care about it, and then you've posited
sure.
that the reason I should care about it is because you have some deeper goal. You have this goal of uh, um, recognizing your unrecognized goals, and this could be a tool to recognize your unrecognized goals. And the reason you have the goal to care about your unrecognized goals is because you are a member of this natural kind. And my response to that is just that that's just to say that also is not the type of relation I'm talking about, even if it's not a causal one. That's the type of relation you're invoking there is just whether I meet a given description. The type of relation I'm talking about is a goal-oriented in service of relation, in the same type of way that I posited by opening the door, get out of my apartment so I can get to the grocery store. What you've offered is a different relation, a relation of it's meeting a description that you have of an archetype, the natural kind. Even if that's true, that's not the type that you're talking about a different relation there.
Wait, hold on. Hmm.
Because again, the reason I care about in terms of the relations of like why what is motivating me, why am I, because I'm not motivated because hey, it turns out that I met the description of this archetype you've posited. No, the reason I'm motivated is because I have the goals, whether that my goals are accurately reflected in the description you've written or something. That could be true or not, but that's not why I'm motivated to care about those sort of things.
Hmm.
Just like if you said,
So,
well, Avi has you wrote on a piece of paper, Avi has the desire to eat food when he's hungry. And I'm
yeah.
like, well, yeah, that accurately reflects me. That's part of my natural kind. But when I go to the grocery store, the reason I'm motivated to go to the grocery store and get food is because I'm hungry and I want to eat. It's not because I'm accurately captured by whatever you've written on that paper. That's just a different relation.
Okay, so I'm not sure if accurate capturing is like
Well, you just said
so
the
yeah,
reason,
sorry.
yeah, you
Yeah,
just said the reason I have this goal is because I am a member of this natural kind, that I am like, that's part of
yes,
being a human, that's part of being a rational agent. But that's just to
yes.
say that me and my goals are are captured or that they're whatever that this natural kind archetype is reflective of my goals.
Oh,
Um,
I see. Okay, hold on. So I'm not sure if that follows, right? So if I say, say you are hungry insofar as you are a human being, that's sure, like there may be a sort of descriptive statement that captures that fact. But like what, makes that fact a fact isn't, the the fact that there's some descriptive statement out there that corresponds to
mhm,
it. It's the inherent human nature itself, right? The
mhm.
relation that you bear to human nature itself, which is the sort of
Okay, so if that's
explanatory.
so yeah, so if
Yeah,
then you're just being
yeah.
then, but then that's just right, but then that's just a posit that there may be some sort of human nature that out of my human nature I take that to be a
Mm.
causal sense by out of like some neurons firing or whatever, like I have some deeper goal, um, but that's fine. The goals are all still stance dependent.
So yeah, yeah. So maybe like so I was trying to avoid it, but like what do we like stance dependence seems to be a concept that we're having trouble with. Like, I have some idea of it, but it seems like we run into like what I would consider not stance dependent. We end up disagreeing on whether what I posited is stance dependent, right? So I would say if there is an objective, if there is a real sort of natural kind human nature which has its dispositions and interests, and those are in turn explanatory of the dispositions and interests that I happen to have, whether as sort of outgrowths or defects in my underlying interests, then, I, who want to fulfill my interests, will want to, you know, not put my own subjectivity first, but put this sort of, underlying human nature first, right? So I can't satisfy myself except insofar as I regard myself as not the ultimate end of my own actions, but as my, but treat my subjectivity as as an instrument of this underlying sort of interest, right? So, where was I going with this? Um, Sorry, I've lost myself there. Oh yeah, and so yeah, but what we're disagreeing about is whether this amounts to a stance independent sort of system. And I think, like, at least as I've just explained it, like,
The
it
goal, the
does,
goal,
but you would
the
say it
goal.
doesn't?
Oh, absolutely not. No, the goals,
Mm,
the goals themselves. No, like if I have the goal of meeting this, um, of making myself correspond in some way to this stance dependent, um, caricature, stance independent caricature of the whether you call that natural kind or whatnot. Um,
mm.
the goal is stance dependent. I have the goal. That's a goal that I have. It's within my mind. If it's dependent on my mind. If I didn't, if I didn't for it to be there in me anyway. If I didn't have it,
But
if I didn't have it,
if you couldn't have it except insofar as it was subject to some other goal, then surely at that point you'd have to say, well, like my stance dependent goals are and should be, you know, uh, thought of as
you're invoking
relative to these
you're invoking the
sort of
shit.
independently given ends.
Wait, you're doing it again. You're invoking the normative language in a sense that I'm not already. When you say should be, you just mean with respect to this. You just mean that if you just mean by
If I want to achieve my stance, if I want to achieve even my stance dependent goals,
okay,
the only way to do so while being true to what they are is to think of them, if the natural kinds talk is true, is to think of them as
the
subordinate goals to
right,
to the goals given by that natural kind, right? That's but
yeah,
surely that's not. Yeah,
as described by the natural kind. Yes, but then there's
yeah,
still
right.
but the point is that, but again, that's the same problem. It's just that what you've done here is you've created a model that
Yeah.
is that is accurately capturing or describing um,
Hmm.
people who fit this archetype's stance dependent goals. That's fine. You could do that. You could create such models. No one's denying that. It's just in the same way that a computer program can create a model of that. They can
Okay.
take all the inputs. We have the genetic code. We have like all the physical physics vectors, and we spit out all the values that this person will have.
All right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's fine. But that in no way in no way do I see that computer and be like, aha, this is objective morality. No, this is just an accurate depiction of my subjective values in the same way that if I were to write my subjective values out on a piece of paper, um, and if and I would say, oh well, I fully captured it, and if I was somehow did the perfect job, well, great, you've captured it. And whether you've gotten there from a model that summates certain posited natural kinds or not, doesn't change the picture for me. It's just
Right.
a different way
So,
of arriving at the same thing.
hmm, yeah, I don't know. I think there's an issue of like translation between different semantic frameworks, I guess. Um, Let me think. So, sorry, you were saying something? Um,
No, I wasn't.
yeah,
I think the point
yeah,
is,
no,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because remember the dialectic is just at this point,
mm,
the dialectic is granting all the empirics that you've created the perfect model that accurately captures all of my values, recognize the
yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
any reason I have to care about such a model that would be persuasive to me,
right,
motivating to me, is just going to be stance dependent. And
It's going to be motivating to you in virtue of its being stance dependent.
No, in virtue of me having some stance dependent goal or value that care about it either in and of itself or instrumentally, and to whatever degree that.
So I'm willing, yeah. So like I'm willing to grant that like there needs to be in order for sort of persuasion to take,
Mhm.
there's got to be some kind of commitment that you can bring out, right? Yeah, sure. I
And
don't think that
just
anyone who believes in objective morality would
yeah,
dispute that.
and if the reason is
But
just
yeah,
say wait, there's a further point, and if the reason
yep.
and if I do have a reason to, and if I do have some
Yeah.
goal, some stance dependent goal to recognize such things
Hmm.
and have an accurate understanding, a recognized accurate understanding of all my goals, um,
Hmm.
I would turn to such an instrumental tool. But any move, but if the move is to say the reason I have such a goal is because I'm I have I am a member of this natural kind. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that doesn't change the picture toward any more of a stance independent toward my goals or values being any more stance independent than they previously were. It's just to say that the reason it's going to be epistemically accurate is going to be that because that I'm a member of this natural kind. That gives me reason to think it's epistemically accurate. Um, but it gives me no more reason. It gives me no reason to think that my values or goals are stance independent in any way. You've just very accurately described it, and so like, hey, I'm going to go with your tool because it's a really fucking good tool. It's very epistemically accurate.
It doesn't give you a reason to think that your stance, your values are stance independent. So I think if you're, I don't know, so so you may well quibble with this. I'm just asking in a sort of exploratory way. Like,
Mhm.
are you saying it's sort of analytic that your that like I don't know are you taking sort of moral realists to be disputing analytic truth then that sort of my stance my values insofar as I am like a stance taker are going to be
No, no, I
stance
don't. I don't
dependent
take them
values.
to dispute. No, I don't. I don't take them to dispute that. I'm taking them to
Yeah.
posit a different account of what it means. I just don't understand any. I just what I don't understand is any account that's intelligible and also gives me reason to be motivated towards such a thing without such reasons invoking the type of stance dependent sort of values that I have that the
Mm.
same moral realist positing to me wouldn't disagree with either.
So So I don't know. I think any moral realist who's going to make an appeal to you, like just given the nature of appeals, right, is going to have to appeal to something you already hold. But it seems that just in virtue of your already holding it, you're going to say, oh well, the only ground of that appeal is stance dependent. But I don't think that that's right because once
Yeah, but we
you
just agreed they
go,
would agree with that. We just said they
sorry,
would. Wait, but no. But this is not something that I'm just sticking to because I already hold it and they don't. They hold it too. They hold it too that the motivating feature. Because again, remember, this isn't a question of like whether it's true or not. This is a question of like if I
because
have reason to be motivated toward it and what reason that would be. Because in the relation in the type of relation that I posited. Now, if the because again, like, and you've agreed the reasons I have to be motivating are such um and if anyone's going to say like, well, the reason you have uh this goal is because you're a member of this natural kind. Look, I don't take that to be anything different than um either one of the two following things, either a relation of accurate description, that is to say, I fit a member of the archetype, I fit the model, or some sort of another thing I hear, which is not what doesn't seem to be what you're saying, is a type of causal explanation where it's like, well, your brains were firing this way. I can grant
yeah,
both of those types of explanations, but those aren't the types of explanation relations I'm talking about when I was talking about before. But I grant all of that. I grant that there are objective influences in the causal explanation to my stance-dependent or subject norms. So do moral realists to my values, moral realists. And
Yeah.
I also grant that my subjective values can be accurately described or not accurately described, and so do moral realists. We don't disagree on any of those things.
Okay, great.
What I'm having trouble understanding is
Mm.
the fact that you've accurately described my values.
Mhm.
Um, do you think that in any way um do you think that in any way makes my values somehow like objective, or do you think that my values are still subjective, my values, my goals, my desires?
So, okay, hold on. So the question is, does the fact that, would the fact that my account accurately captures your values
Mhm.
make your values objective? Your
Yeah.
currently held values objective?
Yeah, well, all of them recognized and not recognized.
Well, so if my account is correct, then
Mhm.
some of your values will be um like some of your actual values will be in accordance with like the objective system of values that applies
I
to
didn't,
you,
that's not what I
but
wait, wait,
but
I didn't
others
ask,
will not.
I didn't ask if there's a no, hold on, wait. I didn't
Yeah.
ask you if there's like some relation between my values in like some objective sense. That's not what I asked. I asked
Okay,
if
okay. Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. My bad.
Yeah, what I asked you is, does the fact that you've found a model that can accurately predict or
Hmm.
describe all of my values, recognized and unrecognized, somehow
Mhm.
make my values themselves objective, like mind external?
Um, so I want to say yes, but I'm not sure. Sorry, there's an issue. I think I might have an issue with the way that question is being framed, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. Just give me a second. Um, so sorry, let me just write it. Have we written it out already, or I'll write it out because maybe I'll need to look at it written out
Yeah,
to
so
really understand.
when I talk about morality, I'm talking
Yeah,
about my values, my goals, my desires, the disposition, the things I
yeah.
feel, the things like it's like some sort of subset of my feelings, my attitudes towards certain things. Um,
Hmm.
so that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. And there are ways of describing those things that I have accurately. That is the way I actually have them. And there's the way of describing them inaccurately. That is the way I don't have them. We're on the same page about that, surely.
Sorry, I was just writing down the question. I might have missed what you've just said. I'm sorry.
If he wants to just
Yeah.
think for a minute, maybe I'll speak to Avi for a sec while
Yeah.
you think about the
Sure.
question.
Yeah.
You got the
Okay.
question,
Great.
right?
So yeah, so I've written down something just while I think. So I'm going to think about it, but let me just make sure it's accurate while I think about it. So does the fact. So the question is, does the fact that my values can be accurately described according to your model make my values stance independent? Is that the question?
Yeah, I'm make my values meaning like some external to objective or external to the mind in some way, and values, goals, and desires is what I would say. Like my value.
Values, extra. I'll add goals and desires. Yeah.
So yeah, this I guess now you've been talking to Anselmian
Mhm.
for a similar amount of time to the amount that I spent with him, and we have ended up actually in very similar places. So this is why you might see now why at the start when you asked if he was a naturalist, moral realist, or what, I was like, well, I'm not gonna really say exactly because it's not entirely clear. What I it seems like what happens in this discussion, you can tell me if you agree or not. It reminds me of the hand stacking game. I posted a gif of it up here. Here, I'll
Mhm.
post it again for other
Yeah, I
people.
saw that. I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you made the point that what kind of was the central point when I ended up discussing with him, which is just that if you go down the trivial pathway, then you'll get something that I'll agree with, but which won't have any kind of normative force in the sense that you want it to. And if you go down some other kind of pathway of trying to make it more substantial or substantive, then I'm going to either not be clear what you mean or see a reason to think that it's false. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like the hand stacking game where it's like, well, here's this thing that sounds kind of spooky, and then you look at it and it's like, well, it's actually not spooky, and you're like, okay, it's trivial, so I can grant that, and yeah, there's no normative force to that. And then he's like, but wait, here's this other part, and then you're like, okay, it kind of just repeats like
Yeah,
the
like the whole but the reason that you have this value is because of this, like, yeah, I see,
yeah,
I see,
like
yeah.
for when I talk to him, it started. I don't think I can do the whole dialectic, but you'll still get the idea of it's like, things are right or wrong. Why are they right or wrong? Because there are proper definitions for things, and what makes definitions proper is the mereological laws around object formation and what determines the correct mereological law. So we had this big stack of stuff, and we kind of ended up going back and forth at every time that I advanced a layer deeper. Like it was like the spooky thing was being kind of pushed back a layer each time. Every time I would advance like a layer deeper into this kind of like, like edifice. It's like it's something is explained in terms of something that sounds spooky to preserve the like normative kind of force sounding part of it, right? Then you inquire into the spooky thing, it's not spooky, but then you hear about the next seemingly spooky thing, and then it turns out being not, and it's kind of that repetition as like more concepts are introduced.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
can't Ansel? I mean, but surely, like, he recognizes this, like, issue that's being brought. Like, can't he, like, do this work himself? Like, he can, like, say, okay, well, listen, here's I want to explain this in terms of this. I want to explain that in terms of that. I want to keep going back and back. But can't he just apply? Surely he can apply the same question to test his view. Like, he can say,
I
okay,
Sure,
yeah,
but it's very obvious talking to him that the
mhm,
thought patterns, like you or I or Lance or Troy, who he's also talked with and
mhm,
who said similar things, although those were text conversations, it's very obvious that he's coming from a really different like school of philosophy. So I think that it's not intuitive to him to complete the whole thought pattern that we would go down. So it's probably beneficial to actually talk to someone who has a view like we have. I don't think he could represent your whole way through the position. Probably, I would be surprised if he had like that level of depth of understanding where we're coming from like being here for like a week or two.
yeah, it's just for everything that for something you posit, is it going to be intelligible? If so, if it is intelligible, does it carry normative force? That is to say, is it intelligible and also is motivating and also is mind external? Um, if no, then presumably the move is to explain the mind internal thing in terms of something else that would accomplish that goal. But then just repeat the same question. Um, and
Yeah,
so,
for each new thing you introduce, whether it's
yeah,
proper definitions, mereological laws that determine proper definitions, some kind of further standard that determines correct mereological. Like at each step that you're invoking the next objective seeming thing. Well, sorry, I'll let you continue. Yeah.
yeah, test each of those criterias for every new thing that's introduced to push to preserve the view. Like to so in the case here, it's to, well, why do you care about it? Well, the reason you care about it is because it's the essence of who you are. It's your natural kind. Okay, well, apply all those criteria to natural kind. Is it intelligible? Does it carry normative force? And if it carries, um, and if it carries normative force, and is it carrying normative force because it's in some sort of mind external way? Well, turns out no. The reason it carries normative force is because of mind internal considerations, like my goals. And then the next move is to say, well, the reason you have your goals is just because you are a member of this natural kind. Okay, well, is that sort of thing again? Yes, I may fit the description. I may be a member. Um, is that intelligible? Yes, I'm a member. Apply the same criteria. Am I is it intelligible? Yes, it's intelligible that I'm a member. Does it carry normative force? Um, it carries normative force instrumentally as an epistemic tool. Um, but and is it mind external? Well, the reason it carries normative force to me, that I'm a member of one of these, that I'm a member of this natural kind, is just epistemic for my mind internal goals. So again, and then you may try to say, oh well, the reason you have this goal for you may go into a regress. Well, the reason you have this goal for this, uh, for being this member is just because you're a natural kind, and then we can actually go into a regress there, but that's not going to get you the answer then. So, yeah, so just keep applying the same criteria for each step.
Yeah.
You'll either go on infinity, or you'll go into an infinite regression, or you're gonna, like, that's where it seems like this is going.
Yeah, it's like with this thing is explained by God. What explains God? Like you have to. Well, although I don't know if that will have much force to Anselmian if he I don't, I think he is a Christian, so I don't know if using examples of supposedly bad religious reasoning would be
Let's
persuasive to him.
Say it's Satan who created everything.
Yeah, like it's but you the way you just described it was perfect though. Like the thing is, there's a looping character to this discussion, right? You're not raising tons of new objections. You're just repeatedly finding a way to describe how new things introduced fall prey to the prior um, uh, problem that you raised, right? That is, there's a looping kind of pattern there, and when there's a looping pattern, you need to be asking about each attempt you make to terminate the loop, whether the exact things that applied to the prior loop that led to this loop's creation can be applied this time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recall myself saying quite a few times in discussion, well, this is just going to be the same problem.
Yes. Yeah. I think you got a point. Maybe that's not obvious in real time. Is that obvious to people watching that there's a looping kind of character? And don't just say it's obvious. Like, is it obvious, or does it feel like there's a flow through the conversation? It's not clear that there's a loop going on. Because to me, I see a loop clearly, but I do wonder how obvious that is to people. Because you and I sit around and like debate shit like this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see. No, I see where you're saying how it's like, it's a different type of, more realist attempt, but it fundamentally, like, is just the same. Like, if in the sense that it just falls prey to the same thing. It just, this one ends up continuing to invoke new things, and that either goes on to infinity or loops.
Yeah, but it is fun though. It's a new structure to interact with. Do you regret it? Do you think it was bad?
No, I don't regret it. No, not at all.
At least we could give people something fun to listen to instead.
No, this was way more.
Fled.
This was way more enjoyable, especially after the previous experience I had with the troll.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. Let's ask Anselmian if he's coming back. Maybe he thinks we're just.
They're deafened.
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna ping him. It's just I got a Moonlander keyboard, so my typing speed I made it really bad like a few weeks ago switching layout, and now I switch keyboard, so it's bad again. Someone's gonna beat me to it now that I've said what I'm trying to do. It is satisfying, though, I will say, Avi, to independently converge on the same thing. Wait, did no one ping him? Maybe I was wrong. Okay, I will ping him here, actually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, maybe we can get him to appreciate our loop point somehow. But yeah, no, it's nice to independently end up at the same spot. That was actually kind of what I was most curious about. I was like, are you going to get to some similar thing where it's like it's analytic or it's not, and you get a kind of dilemma? He might have just left. You might have left him with something to think on there. Oh no, there he is.
Sorry, was I being summoned? I'm still thinking. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think Avi and I we had the little discussion we wanted. So at risk of us just kind of just starting to talk about a whole other thing, and then the topic's just gone. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I had some other audio interfering. Yeah, sorry. You guys are done with the discussion, is that right?
Oh yeah,
Hello?
if you're still thinking, you could take all the time you want. You don't have to be pressured. You can. It's getting late here. I mean, you can come back tomorrow or another day or
Uh,
however much time you need.
yeah, sure. I am interested in where the dialectic is going. I think we're kind of hitting on like what Hume called, like our descriptions just insofar as that they are descriptions motivating, right? Like that's the sort of thing that we're sort of stuck on. I'm saying that, well, in a sense they are, and you're saying that, well, there's an obvious sense in which they aren't, right? And I want to say, well, I recognize the sense in which they aren't. I just yeah,
What I'm
I just don't care.
saying,
Yeah,
what I'm going to tell you is the same. It's important to recognize
yeah,
this because the
yeah.
objections I've been making to every layer here are not different. They're all the
Mm,
same. It's just it's just
yeah.
invoking the same criteria and seeing if all the boxes are checked for every step that you've done. Um, this if the next
Mm,
move is to say, well, maybe definitions in and of themselves are motivating or not. My response is just going to be the same response that I've given before. Like, if they're motivating, are they
mm,
motivating a way that fulfills the following criteria? Are they intelligible? Okay, maybe yes. Are they um are they mind uh mind external? The reasons, well, doesn't seem like that because I, if I'm motivated by these definitions, um, it would be because either I have a goal or a value or a desire to um, to uh, to learn of such a definition, um, or another goal, value, desire that is it that learning such a
yeah.
different a definition is instrumental for. And any move to try to push it one step further by saying, well, the reason you have these goals, the reason you have these desires is because you meet the definition, I'm just going to give the same criteria again. Or if the move is to just say, well, your values, goals, desires themselves are mind external, same criteria again, and it might not meet a different criteria. I suspect that one would be intelligibility for me. But it's my replies for every step of the way here have not changed. It's just what it
Yeah,
seems
great. Yeah.
what seems to happen here is that there's one layer, and every time I apply the criteria to one layer, it doesn't meet the bar. Then there's some other layer, doesn't meet the bar. There's some other layer, doesn't meet the same bar, and it just feels like there's some thing that's being protected here that we want to call moral realism that we keep putting layers in front of that either, and we end up going into either just an infinite number of layers or some maybe some regress somewhere or
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can definitely see how the argument's going in a circle. Yeah, I'm obviously trying to find out how to break the circle. Um, yeah, and
it's
okay.
really
So
you could do it to infinity by just
yeah,
invoking.
yeah, yeah. Of course you could, but I don't think that's where anyone wants to end up, right? Yeah, like,
Well,
if I'm wrong, I also want to know how to break it out of it for myself. Yeah, that's interesting. So the objection is so the two steps of the objection are: is it intelligible what I'm proposing?
mhm.
And secondly, does it make my values in some sense mine external? Make the motivating force. Sorry, we're talking about motivating force.
By motivating, it would be something like it's carries persuasive force and like it motivates me to do a given action while also being um uh and the reason I'm doing some motivated action is it's not it's this mind external thing and not in the sense that it's parasitic on my mind internal values goals desires because like you
And
can
by motivating force, obviously we don't mean causal force. We mean something like uh teleological priority, right? It has some sort of for the sake of kind of
in service of like this is
yeah
the
in this yeah in service of yeah, that's fine. That's basically what I meant. Okay, good.
and we're always going to have the question of the thing is it seems to me like this at least in this part of the dialogue there's always going to be a question of like okay well whatever thing that's mind intelligible and mind external that you're positing I'm always going
Hmm.
to be able to ask the question like, well, why am I not just doing this because it's in service of this mind-dependent subjective thing that I have either
Hmm.
that I either have in and of itself
Hmm.
the goal for, or some instrumental force for. And whenever
Yeah.
move thing is, well, the reason you have these subjective goals is
So
X, Y, Z. Well, why
right,
should I care
right.
about that other than my subjective, X, Y, Z? Well,
Okay, great. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not expecting you to stick around at this point, but I'm just gonna try and run through the circle myself, just on my own, right? Because to see if I understand it. So I'm gonna say something like, so as a matter of your human nature, you have the goal of achieving the goods of reason, and then you ask, well, okay, that might be intelligible, right? It might be the case there is a natural kind that naturally pursues the goals of reason. Maybe I fall under that natural kind. Then we'll say about motivating force, like, does that make the motivating force of that truth, if there is motivating force to it, does it make it in some sense mind external? And I
not,
would say,
not,
well,
not in
yeah,
any sense, not in some sense. It's in this a specific sense that we're
okay, yeah,
yeah, that's
does
motive,
does
the
that
motivating sense.
yeah yeah sorry, does that make the motivating force of that of that account, uh
Yeah.
i.e. the in service of sort of relation mind external, right?
In other words, can I
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just say that the reason I care about that is because of some subjective, not stance dependent goal that I have?
Sorry, yeah, that's actually good. Let me see. Can I not say that it's just in service of some stance? That's not. And if not, why not? Right? And that sort of comes along with it, but it's not this. Okay. All right. Cool. And in response to that, I would say,
You can say the
yeah,
reason that you
yeah,
have.
yeah, yeah. And I would say the reason, and then I would say, and this is probably where the loop gets started again.
Mhm.
It's I would say, well, the reason why it's not just in service of some stance dependent goal is that there are no merely stance dependent goals. Well, not that there are no. Hmm, no. I can't say that. That's not what I want to
No,
say. I
it's
want to say that. Yeah.
yeah. The move is to say, well, the reason you have these stance dependent goals in the first place is because you're a member of this natural kind. At least that was what's said in the conversation.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I can see that. I can see that's what came across. Let me
and
think.
then the
Um,
and then the loop is started there because then the
Yeah.
response is
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So yeah, so I think that's right. So I would say at this point, so I propose the natural kind and its ends. You say, does its motivating why can't I just say that its motivating force comes from some stance dependent goal? And then I in turn say, well, the stance dependent goal is itself in service of some external end, and then we get started again.
yeah.
Um, right. Okay. Can I yeah. I'm pretty
Whatever,
sure that we
whatever
yeah.
yeah,
Sorry?
whatever in service of some external end that you can posit, I
Yeah.
could always posit that servicing such an external end may be just a
Hmm.
internal end. Sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so I guess what I would say is hmm. So what I want to say is that like a purely stance dependent goal is unintelligible as such. Like it's only intelligible as a stance dependent goal insofar as it is either the fulfillment or like the violation of some stance independent goal, right? Given by essences or whatever.
hold
Um
on. Wait a minute. Hold 1 second.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's just gotten the loop started again, but that's
Wait,
that's
wait,
that's my instinctive sort of reaction. Yeah.
wait. Are you saying? Wait, I just want to be clear about what the response is. Are you saying that there aren't when you say there are no mere stance dependent goals? What do you mean? What does that mean?
So I would say that there's no goal that's not done for the sake of one's essential goals in some sense, right? Either in a straightforwardly fulfilling sense or in a sort of perverse or disordered sense. or incomplete sense. So
There's
in that sense,
there's no
there's
goal. There's no goal.
there's no merely so for example, if I decide, I just really like you know ice cream or whatever, like,
Yeah.
that's gonna be some way of fulfilling my underlying essence. Otherwise I couldn't be said to even like ice cream, right? There's no sense in which I like ice cream. So that's roughly what I want to say. Again, but again, I'm not sure if this doesn't just get started again.
Wait, 1 second. Are
Yeah.
you saying that there's no um that uh there's no stance dependent goal? There's no goal that's merely a goal that's in service of um that's
Purely subjective desire. Yeah.
purely subjective. So it, as opposed to what, like a non-subjective desire, or like an
Well, as opposed to a composite, uh, you know, uh, subject object. So I think there are objective desires, if you like the ends that follow from one's essence.
wait,
And
wait,
then there are the sort
wait,
of
wait,
yeah
wait. If just as a point of process, if I'm having trouble understanding one point, I'm gonna
yeah
let you
yeah
go on.
no worries yeah
So when you say an objective desire, so remember, notice
yeah
how I'm going to apply the same criteria here. Is
yeah
it intelligible? Which meaning, in other words, are you talking about like my subjective
yeah
desire?
yeah
Are you saying some composite, like, are you talking about like the natural kind sense of the desire that you posited earlier, which would be
mm,
intelligible, but so the former wouldn't be intelligible, at least to me. Maybe, or it may not be intelligible. The latter is intelligible, but it's going to run into the other problem, which is we're going to go looping again. We're going to say, okay,
yeah
well, maybe it isn't. Well, maybe it isn't in service of that, but maybe I just have the meta subjective desire to be in service of that. That's mind dependent. Um, and
mm,
like it, so,
yeah
and if you want, yeah, so, or if you want to say like, um, there just is this, um, yeah, because here's the thing, like I don't know what it means for like my So like I don't know what it would mean for my subjective I don't know what it means for my values, desires, or goals to be external to my mind. Like I don't get that. So that might be
yeah
that'll fall into like the unintelligibility.
yeah Yeah, so what I would say roughly is that your mind, you are not your mind, right? Your mind is an important part of you, but it isn't you.
Well, I
But
don't.
again, like that's
I think that's irrelevant.
we get it, and that's yeah,
Irrelevant.
a
I
person
just
may agree or disagree with that, but
wait.
like
Hold on.
that's
Just I want to point out that is irrelevant. So nothing
yeah
I
yeah 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 that's yeah
nothing I
so,
said connects me to me being my mind. All I'm saying is that I don't know what it would mean for these values that whatever I am. I don't know what it would mean
mm.
for my values, my goals, and desires to be external to my mind, whatever I am.
So I'm I'm thinking that it's analytic that your values goals, given how you implicitly understand you, that your values and goals, things don't belong to you except insofar as they are sort of part of your subjectivity in some sense. So at that point, like anything that that I talk about that is not rooted in that subjectivity on its own terms, you're going to say, oh well, that's just not what I mean by me, right? When I talk about my values and so forth.
How would you mean? I don't
Um,
think what you mean either. Like it's because we already agreed. I don't think a moral realist is going to disagree that my desire to eat food when I'm hungry is thing that's in my mind. Usually, anyway. Um,
yeah, okay.
yeah, because So I don't think there's. It's not like
Yeah.
I'm.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. Hmm. Ugh,
yeah. So that so but
such
so that's one thing. And then if the other move is just to say, well, I'm not talking about your values, goals, desires. What I'm talking about is this art, the natural kind goals, desires. Well, then that's the more trivial claim that'll be more easily to accept if all the empirics work out. I'm just going to ask what
mm,
the motivating force is, and it seems like the motivating force is stance dependent. My values, goals, desires. And if you say well, you don't have those. There are no such things as values, goals, desires um, that are not in service of this arc meeting this end, which is this to be this natural kind. I could even grant that and say, okay, well, that maybe all of these values, goals, desires meet some end, are there to meet some end of this natural kind. But the question is just then going to be, well, maybe the values, goals, desires to meet that end are stance dependent, are just are subjective. And for every, and that's just going to repeat every time we can we can regress on that.
So like at this point I'm just wondering what the like epistemic significance of this is. Like I think like I don't so I guess I don't at my point, given maybe whatever autobiographical facts, I don't care about my mere subjectivity just in virtue of being my subjectivity, right? I think I care about my essence because I think that's what I really am, etc. But like
And
my
your caring,
my
your caring is
yeah yeah
subjective. Your caring can just
well sure my caring like resides in my subjectivity, but my subjectivity is not a thing unto itself, right? So I identify with
you have a
the
service.
the real thing, the real thing that I am, not my own subjective self-representation of it.
You have some subjective values or goals or desires, and they are there's some ends that they want to accomplish. In this case,
Mm.
the goal is to accomplish you
Yeah
having the values, goals, and desires of what is outlined by this natural
yeah
kind. But those things itself is itself a value, goal, desire, which is subjective.
yes, but I think that I can't, that just, again, I'm starting the loop with myself now, right? Like, I don't think those subjective goals and desires are subjective, are mine, except in virtue of being objective, except as subordinate ends of of an objective end,
Right.
right?
But then,
Of an end given by my essence.
and that's
Uh,
right. Wait. But
right.
that could be granted, and everything I said is true. Like that could be like, okay, well, you may very well be the case that your subjective values are just there to have an end, with a goal. The goal being
Yeah.
to have such values
Yeah.
of this natural kind. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
But those are,
Yeah.
but again, the question is,
Yeah.
the motivating force there is just the problem is the motivating force there is is coming from the fact that you have such a value to be of this natural kind, and to whatever answer you can give to say, well, the reason I have such a value is because I have this natural kind. It's just that, well, then the problem with that is that you just have the value to have the value to have to be of the natural kind, and to have the value to have the value to have the value to be of the natural kind, etc., etc.
Yeah. So, hmm. Are we shifting on the meaning of motive force, perhaps? Because if motive force just means, like, the force exerted by an end on its subordinate ends, like, by a goal on its instrumental goals, right? By an ultimate goal on its instrumental goals, then obviously yeah.
I mean, it might give a pro tanto reason to act or change my behavior in some way, or to. I think we're meaning the same thing, or at least I think I mean the same thing by motivating force at the same time. It's like, upon
Yeah, I
learning,
think I might be shifting, so it's, yeah,
what
it's
I mean
useful
is,
clarification.
upon learning such information, does it give me a pro tanto reason to have a certain response, to do a certain action, to adjust in some way, or does it give me a reason to stay the same in some way, or does it have any does it have anything, does it motivate me in any way to do something, like, just the same way if I were to, like, just ostension, if I were to, like, learn that there's a nuclear bomb that's going to go off tomorrow and I need to press this code, I could save everyone. Well, that information coupled with my subjective values clearly will give me motivating force to enter the code in, because I want to save everyone, right? That's gonna give me a pro tanto reason, to really strong one, to push that code, right? But if I were to if someone were to tell me oh well, you know, uh, 26 billion light years away, there's some planet I call Harbelgarg. Is that going to motivate me to do much of anything different in my life? Well, maybe not. Depends, but probably not. So
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, by motivating force, the sort of things we expect when someone is going to present us with here's the objective morality. This is what it means to be more there's an expected motivating force to that. It's well, wow, it's actually it matters that I learned about this. I'm gonna change my life about this now. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
type it's not expected oh, I learned the truth about morality. Well, now let me just keep going about my day like nothing mattered. There's no reason to change anything. That's not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and yeah, so the motive force on the account would be well, at least the way that it would it would typically be presented is well, the motive force comes from the properly functioning constitution
Yeah, but we went
in cooperation with those reasons,
no,
right?
I
So if you find yourself not motivated, it's just because your constitution is not functioning properly.
wait.
Uh, but
That's not the issue.
but for those whose are functioning properly, it will be motivating.
No. I
And
got that.
yeah,
Yeah. You don't have to keep
yeah,
just to the
yeah,
point.
yeah,
It's if I'm cutting you off, it's it's not. I'm not trying to be rude. It's just you don't need to
yeah.
complete the point. I understood it the
Yeah,
first time.
sorry, I'm completely not for your sake, but for my sake. I'm trying to come to grips with the loop, right?
Yeah.
So
So
I need to run through it a few times so I get the pattern so I can
the
engage with it.
contention is that it's not gonna have. The contention isn't that anything you posit will not have motivating force. It might have motivating force. In fact, I've granted you that it would have motivating force to me. The contention is that it will meet all three of the conjuncts, of the disjuncts. Sorry, or really the conjunctive criteria, which is that it will be intelligible and will have motivating force and will be mind. The motivating force will be mind external. So I could grant you that a computer program that will scan my brain will have motivating force to me because I have, and it will be intelligible to me. But the problem is, the reason why it's motivating to me is not because it always be positive to me. It's not because exactly, that's the problem.
Yeah, and I guess I would say, well, yeah, so you would say the reason why it's motivating to you is that you have this pre-commitment to want to know yourself, and therefore blah blah blah. And I would say, well, the reason why you have that is because of your human constitution, blah 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 blah, and so on, and then we get into the yeah
Then
yeah
the reason to the Constitution is the motivating force. That motivating force itself could be subjective, and then we yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see the loop. I don't see a dialectical way out of it. But even weirder, I don't see that I'm wrong either.
Well,
like
the issue is that you started the loop in service of answering a question, so you haven't answered the question. So the question was, the dialectic was, why should I care about this this stance independent sort of thing that you're positing? And you're trying to answer the question by offering something. And so you're answering the question by starting the loop, and then when the same problem is pointed out, you're just looping. You're continuing the loop, and so that's not the sort of thing that actually answers the question, whether you go into infinity or whether you go into a regress. And so the problem with it is that you haven't actually ended up providing a something that has a motivating force, is intelligible, and also is mind external. So if that was your goal, then
great, sure. So and that leads me to wonder, well, should that be my goal, right? Should I be trying to give you a reason to care about it that isn't subject to this loop? You know, or should I just be trying to appeal to whatever is properly functioning in you, right? Like, and consider my job done if you do find it persuasive. Um,
Well, no, it's not.
like,
The problem is
yeah,
not like the whole proper functioning thing isn't even being called into. I mean, well, we that's not even the beginning of the issue. Like there's many issues I could bring up with this, but like right now we're on the most fundamental one. Fundamental one is
yeah,
just
yeah,
that.
yeah, sure.
Fundamental one is just that we could grant everything about the proper function and some in the sense you're talking about
Mm.
and all that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
We can grant
And
the
then you'd say, well, where's the motive force coming from? The motive force is coming from, and you would say, it terminates in subjective. At least there's no reason why you can't eliminate that it terminates in subjective commitment.
in other words, you haven't offered an account of what I take people who are objective realists want to offer an account of. That is something intelligible, something
Mhm.
that really is mind independent, and something that also
Yeah.
offers a motivating force, something that offers a normative force. That's something that I'm not going to just look at and say, "Oh, okay, cool," shrug my shoulders. Next, like,
I mean, I think objective moralists are going to say, well, there's always going to be somebody who's just going to look at the right and just shrug their shoulders, right? So I don't
no,
think
no, no, not at
objective,
any like,
yeah,
not at any like defect, because like on the account I'm giving you, um, I can it's possible for me to it may be possible for you to shrug my shoulders while not being defective on your account. We haven't even gotten there. Like the things that you
well,
yeah.
I don't think that you can be not defective on my account.
Well, the
Like,
things that
if you are not moved by a true description of what you are to do what's truly in your interest,
that's, that's,
that would be defective on my account, even if you shrug your shoulders at it, right? Like,
that's fine. Wait, but that's fine.
yeah,
But you recall in the dialectic the things that your account
yeah,
has failed on. The things that your account has failed on is when I say
mm,
motivating force, I just mean that the reasons why they're motivated. So like it's
yeah,
it's either failed on um it's either failed on one of the three actually. So okay, so
yeah,
um it's so by motivating force what they want to say is they want to say something intelligible, they want to say something that um is mind external, and the motivating force is coming from the mind external thing. That's the key. um it's like the thing that is motivating here is the mind external. It's not
yeah,
the motivating force here is the mind internal thing. um it's the motive the
yeah.
yeah,
So
because like
yeah, well, coming from the mind external thing, like I don't think the objective moralist wants to say that motive force can only come from the mind external thing insofar as it like doesn't it doesn't impact your subjectivity. Like that would be just be a contradiction in terms. Like even if mm, so,
like I could be an actor that doesn't violate any of the laws of logic. I could be and by laws of logic we could just dial that in specifically so that we don't
yeah,
like that question, so we don't like entail and like, oh, by logic I just mean you have to be motivated by this thing that I'm positing. um so
mm,
I can know all the like the standardly accepted logical systems. I can have all the inferences. I can know all the facts and still shrug my shoulders. Then I could. And you would just have to say that, well, someone like that is defective in some way. But then like
yeah,
that sense of defective isn't really something that I would really care about, nor a whole lot of people who are subjectivists would care about. um that term wouldn't really have any biting force to them, because if by defective you don't mean any of those sorts of things, like, well, I'm making some logical error as I've outlined it, or I'm invoking a false fact as I've outlined it, or making invalid inferences as I've outlined it, then um, who cares if you say it's defective? So yeah,
um,
it's one of anyway.
hmm,
It's the same thing
yeah,
over and over again. It's the same.
yeah. So yeah, so hmm, hold on. So sorry, I'm having a lot of false starts here because I'm trying to come to grips with what we're talking about. Um. So yeah. So by having motive force, you mean motive force for subjectivists who are also committed to logic and so forth, just insofar as they are what they are. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's just
all
yeah.
the
So
like,
yeah, so I think there is an obvious, at least from my point of view, a sense in which like rejecting the ends supplied by your nature is defective. Like it's defective for the human being and you insofar as you are a human being. Um but like your contention is that, well, someone could reject the ends supplied by your nature even if they happen to have those ends, at least as coming from nature, right? So they might accept those ends just because they already accept them in some sort of implicit sense. But yeah, so they might reject the ends that you're proposing without any logical error, without any sort of logical mess up. Therefore, they're still being like perfectly good on their own terms. And so like your argument won't have motive force for such people.
they're not making a logical error. They're not making
Yeah,
they could have all the sound arguments. They could have all the all their
yeah.
beliefs can be true even.
Mm,
But
yeah.
they'll just look at what and they'll hear you calling them defective and just be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure that's actually inconsistent with my position. So,
Oh, yeah,
yeah, like,
but the point
yeah,
is that but the point of the word defective then is like if you want to because there's an obvious there's an obvious connotation and
mm,
denotation with what that word
yeah,
like it's supposed to have some
yeah,
teeth to it that bite,
yes, yes,
but it
but
doesn't.
some people, well,
Like,
all I can say,
well, it's different
yeah,
then. Being more honest, don't say
yeah.
it's they're different.
Well, not, I mean, not that would be begging the question against myself, right? Because I think that you are really defective in this way if you are not motivated to be what you really are. So
Well, well, I mean, look, wait, but but the point is just that um well, you could say defective on my usage, different on your usage, because the point
yeah,
that yeah, because if you were to like present it to a subjective, it's like, oh, you're defective because you can't complete this valid inference, right?
yeah,
That's going to be a much more honest usage of the term defective. It's going to be a more accurate representation to them. Even they'll accept. Oh
yeah,
yeah, that is defective. Um,
yeah, okay, yeah,
yeah, but
yeah, sure.
if you come out swinging and saying, oh, you're defective,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah. So I agree that, I would, it benefits from saying, what you would call different, I would call defective,
right?
and, and so on. Yeah, sure. Hmm.
Yeah. So then, either way, the
Yeah.
issue
Yeah.
remains.
We're left at the impasse, but I'm not sure that the impasse is like inconsistent with the truth of my view or with what moral realists in general even want to claim. Right? They don't want to say that I can, persuade any um I'm not even sure if they want to say that they would have motive force for like every agent that doesn't make a logical mistake in understanding it. Um yeah, because there's always the possibility that something else is going wrong somewhere that just isn't responding to a proper logical presentation in the way that it ought to be. On a sort of natural law construal of ought, right? Um, yeah, so yeah, but I'm not sure even like that a moral realist really wants like requires for the truth of his view that we avoid that kind of impasse. Yeah, maybe there are such people whose like you know mechanisms, whose truth representing mechanisms, including the logical ones, aren't malfunctioning, but maybe their ability to respond to it is, right? Like maybe that's the case. Like and that's perfectly fine with me.
By responding mechanisms. I'm just, but we'd have to really dial what we mean by that in. Um, but regardless, it's going to be one of two. The pathway is going to be the same. If it's like if by responding you're baking into the cake your position, then well, no one will care. No subjectivist has a reason to care. If by responding you mean the type of
Yeah.
that subjectivists
Yeah.
would
Yeah, so
talk,
I would say, no subjectivist as a subjectivist, but
it's not
even
going.
a subjectivist, if he is, if he, I guess if he, I want to, yeah, if he identifies as what I am,
Well,
yeah,
in-
sorry, we're getting the loop started again. I don't want to go down that road, so hold on.
Get-
Yeah, let me just
so
cut
this
that
is the
off.
principles. Yeah, I think you got the picture because
Yeah.
picture. So this is the principled objection, and then the second objection. We're not even out. So the second objection is just the empirical one.
Yeah, sure.
Which is really just for you to provide evidence that I am a member of the thing that you've described, and that you have such um, you have such such a whatever this natural kind is, it will
Mm.
correspond to all of my values, recognized and unrecognized, and so
Well, I don't want to say it will correspond to all of your values, right? Because obviously I want to change some of your values, or I may want to change some of your values. So
wait,
maybe not that.
but then I have another reason to not care about the natural. So now I have a whole different sort of reason to not care about the natural. Because remember, my reason for caring was because I want the epistemic tool to realize my undesired values and all the values I have that are in service of that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Now,
but well, I mean, yeah. Sorry, go on. I was
once you say
yeah.
that it's allowed that I have values that don't match up with the natural kind values, then I see no reason to adopt the natural kind values if they're different from my values. Like, let's say it turned out that the natural
Well,
kind value is to stomp a baby. Like we did the work.
well, if the natural kind values provide no action guidance or action correction
There
force
is an
at all, then what?
there
Then
is there is
there is no point. Yep. Sorry.
no. I'm saying that in this case, no. I'm saying that if there are values if the natural kind values are different than my
Mhm.
value, then um I wouldn't, to whatever degree that they're different, there's just the degree I wouldn't care about the natural kind values. Because, like, let's just say that we did the work and the natural kind values provide a prescription saying you are currently not stomping a baby. You need to be stomping a baby, and you need to do it now to be a morally good person. I'm just going to look at that and be like, well, yeah, that's the natural kind value, but I'm not stomping a baby. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's an interesting psychological fact about you, maybe. But like
No, I don't think
I,
that's interesting
I
at all. That's pretty
yeah,
non-interesting.
yeah. It's
I don't
not,
you think it's interesting.
if I don't think there's any possible world where that deduction goes through, but
Hold on,
if
wait. Stop.
yeah, sorry, what are we
Yeah.
talking about now?
Wait, just to be clear, let's just be clear on what I said. The
Yeah,
natural kind archetype
yeah,
prescribes that I stomp a baby, right?
sure,
My values are not to stomp a baby, and I would look at that and be like,
yeah,
okay, well, I'm not doing that.
yeah,
Um,
sure, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
so
have no reason to doubt that prediction about what you would do,
uh,
certainly. But it wouldn't, if per impossibile, that was the situation. Uh, I guess I'm happy to bite the bullet. Like at that point, like you just would be violating your actual values, right?
well,
Uh,
I wouldn't. Not on your lights, because you just said that my values don't have to have perfect alignment with
so-
the natural values.
oh, sorry. I think, man, we've been trying. Yeah, that's the problem. We're using two different semantic frameworks, and it's not clear when I'm making the transition, and I'm not disciplined enough to point that out. So when I say, so hold on. So all I'm getting at is that to be action guiding, the natural kind values need to have a certain kind of priority over the values that one subjectively holds. Like it needs to show that, well, I may hold these values, but in light of knowing what the natural kind values are, it is good to revise the values that I happen to hold. Right.
So
So
is
if it
that
turns out that,
just clarity before we move on? So is that just to
yep,
say that if I'm a member of the natural kind, then what I will do is I may not have all the same values, but upon realizing the discrepancy, I will be motivated
yeah,
to resolve the
yeah,
discrepancy in the direction.
upon realizing the discrepancy, given that I'm properly functioning, I will be motivated to align my values with what the natural kind prescribes.
Okay, so then that's fine. That resolves that end of the horn. But then we're back to the other end of the horn, which is just the empirical horn, which is to provide evidence that I have
Yeah.
such values that result in the discrepancy in that given direction.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And that's
Yeah.
not
What's the
what I want to.
evidence?
So we've been here a while, and I'll just give a brief sketch as to how I think it would proceed, right? Rather than dive into the nitty gritty. But in general, I would say, well, we ask, well, what kind of agent is doing we ask the question, like what kind of agent is asking the question, right? What's necessary to ask the question includes something like a faculty of reason, but not just reason operating in a void, right? Because obviously what's doing the asking is a kind of agent acting in the world. So a rational agent of a certain kind. Well, what kind of rational agent? Well, it seems empirically that it's an organic agent, so we append to that it's a rational animal of some kind, and so forth. So that's roughly how I would proceed in sort of arguing that, in fact, you do belong to this natural kind of rational animal, and that the ends which are proposed by
When you say
these faculties.
rational agent of some sort, you mean encompassing the whole thing that is this natural kind thing, including the
Yeah.
realization part and the adjusting the values to the natural kind thing.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
think that
wait, but
that down the line, right?
yeah, but that's not empirical evidence. That's just a question begging analysis. It's a question begging argument.
Well, so the empirical side of it is the sort of examination of what it is to be the asking sort of agent, right? Like it might be that no such thing corresponding to this description exists at all, right? Maybe mereological nihilism is true.
The
Maybe
question we're trying to
organisms are fully reducible to the chemical components, so there is no such thing as the
wait,
organic agent, things like that.
maybe this is one of the seems to be like we're going into some territory where philosophers um aren't recognizing that they're squarely in an empiric territory, and this is not how empirical questions are resolved. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
the question at hand is an empirical one. It says you have a certain model. It posits certain characteristics about
Yeah.
yeah, and then the question is whether I actually have those specific characteristics in question.
Right.
That
Yeah.
is that's a squarely empirical question, and
Yeah.
this type of thing that this art. And so like, what's the evidence?
Well, yeah. Well, the evidence that you are the same kind. What? So the evidence for the view that you also have rational faculties,
Mm, no,
or
it's
the view that you're also a rational agent. Like,
unless you mean
what's
by
the?
unless you mean by rational faculties something that is baking into the cake all of those things that we just mentioned. In which case, I'll ask you for evidence of that.
So I'm not baking anything into the cake. I'm just, again, I'm not trying to derive all of the functions that I asserted were part of.
No, not all. Like
Uh,
the specific
yeah.
ones we talked about, which is that if upon realizing the discrepancy between the natural kind you've outlined and my values, that I will be motivated to resolve
Right.
the.
Yes. Sorry. I wasn't even. Yeah. I think I might have misunderstood the task there. I wasn't actually even asserting that. I was just illustrating the general procedure by which you might try to discern and show what natural kind you are, right? So I haven't made any case for the fact that if you were an agent of the rational animal kind, that you would have this conform to the truth of what you are kind of end, right?
So you,
So I haven't made an argument for that yet.
okay,
All I'm making the argument for at the moment, all I'm showing at the moment is how you would go about showing in general that a thing belongs to, a natural kind and a natural kind of the rational animal sort, right? Whatever that entails, I haven't unfolded any of that yet. So I think that,
but hold on,
sorry, what? Yeah.
So I'm just hold on, because
Yeah.
remember we got let's follow the dialectic. We got to the
Yeah.
because it's one of two pathways. Either you take the view that
Yeah.
I have this, and let's just call it the conforming value, which is just to say if I have a discrepancy, let's for simplicity of the discussion, we'll call it the conforming value. I'll change my values to match the natural kind. If you're positing that to be a member of this natural kind, I must have the conforming value, and if I do not have the conforming value, I'm not a member of the natural kind. Or you don't take that.
Yeah.
So
I do take the view. Actually, sorry. What do you mean by having the value? Do you mean it on my sense, in the sense of an object of an inherent disposition, or do you just mean like in your sense, like in terms of subjectively having it before you?
whatever will result in me doing it. Like it's just like if I
All right.
met with it,
Yeah.
this response will happen. Like I will, whatever for whatever reason, if I'm met with nonconformity, I will conform to this natural kind. And so, if you're going to take the view that says to be a member of the natural kind, I must have conformity upon
Yeah.
realization.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So
And then the question
yeah.
is then, yeah. So then the question is an empirical one. It's an empirical question of then, well, then it's not just an analytic question about whether I am a member of the natural kind. That now we're in an empirical question about whether I am a natural kind. And because there's an open question about whether I have the conformity condition. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Hold
I
on.
don't know if I have the conformity condition. So
Yeah. Hold on.
we don't remember the natural kind.
Right. Okay. So I think I might have misunderstood the empirical sort of pathway that we're trying to like the empirical nature of the question. That's what I've misunderstood.
That's
Hold
going
on.
to be resolved by some sort of
Yeah.
brain scan or psychology work or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Someone-
Yeah. Different kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah. So if I were to say instead that I think it is, well, so I don't think that sort of, my account can be established independently of certain empirical findings, right? Like it's an empirical finding that we are able to, reason and act in accordance with reason and so forth. And so my argument doesn't even get off the ground unless that's true. But given that that's true, I think that one can deduce. So at this point, it might be analytic.
And I
Given
have the
that's true,
conformity
one can deduce the conformity relation ultimately.
Okay, so
Um,
I will give
yeah,
you that. Yeah, so
yeah,
there's going to be two pathways again. You'll notice a common theme here. There's two pathways.
yeah. I notice. I can see it. I can see it coming.
So the response is going to be very simple. Either in the deduction you are baking into the cake into what you mean by reason to have the conformity condition. In which case, I'm just going to say, well, I agree with the deduction, but I do. But it pushes the problem just one step back. Then
do I have such a thing?
I have such a then I'm just going to say, as you've defined reason, which just bakes into the cake that I have the conformity condition. I'm not. What's the evidence that I have reason? What's the evidence that I'm a member that can reason on your construal of reason? And if you're not going to do that, if you're not, then well, good fucking luck with the deduction.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So if I say that it's an implication of your ability to reason that you will have this value, you say, well, I don't have this value, therefore I don't have that kind of ability to reason. Um. Well, I don't know. Isn't that just like, I don't know.
Well,
Are
it's
we
more.
doing like
I don't even.
modus ponens, modus tollens thing?
I don't even
Like,
have to do that. Well, no, I don't even have to do that. It's on you to. Well, you're the one making the claim. It's on you to. Um, it's on you to either provide the deduction, uh, and the key here is that.
yeah. So what I would yeah. So maybe what I would be trying to do is I'd be trying to say, well, the price of denying that you are this kind of a thing is denying that you are a reasoner of a kind that even you would consider to be important,
Yeah, but
right?
that's the key
So
there.
like,
That's the key
yeah,
because if you're gonna define a reasoner as someone who has the conforming condition,
yeah,
then it's not
yeah.
gonna
So I
be
don't want.
a reason that I'm gonna care about being
So
important.
basically I want to say that in virtue of being the kind of reasoner that even you would consider important,
Mhm.
the kind that's able to define words and
Yeah,
think in logic, uh, that it's an implication of being that kind of a reasoner
mhm.
that you also have
Conformity condition.
um,
The
that you
conformity.
also have the conformity that you also have the conformity value, whether or not you can see it. So
Yeah,
given that that's true, if you accept that, if you accept one, then you accept the other, and
yeah,
given
but
that you
that's
do
the
accept one,
deduction that's
you should
for.
accept
Yeah,
the other.
but
Yeah, and
that's the
that's the
implication.
deductive
That's
element of it.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
implication that I want an argument for or evidence for.
Yes. Okay. Great. Yeah, and that's what I wasn't doing when I was just saying, well, if you look at us, we can reason. Okay. Good.
Yeah, but
Um.
that's
Yeah.
not the that's but anyway that just so you're familiar like that or you're
Yeah.
acquainted like that's the second issue. The second issue. So the first issue we went through. There's the looping issue. There's like the principled objection. That's the main issue. Um, Second issue is
Mm.
just the issue to say like, okay, well, how do I know that I'm a member of what you're describing? Um, and that's going to either be some analytic, again, common theme, two pathways, analytic or empiric claim. If it's an empiric claim, what's the evidence? If it's an analytic claim, what's the
Well,
deduction? Does the
yeah.
deduction take the thing I would care about or not, or should this, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
it's a yeah, well, it's an analytic implication of an empirically accessible fact, is what I would say. So, like,
I mean,
how do you know I have a conformity value? Well, I know that you have reason, and that given that you have reason, it follows that you have that value.
yeah,
So
but
yeah,
by reason, do you
like
as what I mean? I mean by reason?
able to define words. Let's
Okay,
just
well
put it that way. Like,
then it's not clear to me that follows, and you're gonna have
yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, and I'd have to develop it further, but we're just setting out the
Can I
pathway that persuasion would have to take.
can I
Sorry.
propose like just like point of progress, like a suggestion for how to have this discussion better? We are getting
Yeah,
so much equivocation because of this. Like you've pointed this out too, Anselmian, just because of the different
yeah,
semantics. So I propose that in the cases that you're both using different versions of the term, like reason, you separate it into like, a reason for Avi reason,
yeah,
or like I reason,
uh,
M reason for
yeah,
Anselmian reason, or something. Like you got to just take
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
just make a little convention
yeah,
for subscripting, and then just
yeah.
use it for every term that you're, because it's
yeah,
very, even a really smart person is very hard to catch every single time that's happening. It's a weird thing to pay attention for. So you just need to like resolve it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's what makes it hard to have in a verbal dispute, I
yeah.
guess.
And same thing for like
Um,
words,
yeah,
even words like human, like even words like agent or human, like we're gonna use those words differently, and so let's just say.
mm,
Yeah, all the words that you're talking about, like I'm happy to take the prime. You could take the prime if you want. We can talk. Let's just have reason and reason prime, human prime, agent prime.
And flag them if you
Yeah.
notice one being coming up, like be like, okay,
yeah,
we need to prime that one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because
Um,
that's then you're gonna see the
yeah,
pattern. Then it's very clear. It's just But
Yeah.
okay, but I think we did make the progress we need, though. I think, in spite of it being hampered somewhat by that, because yeah, it's just like if you say, well, you're someone who can, if you're someone who can reason prime, on which prime being your usage, then you're someone who has the conformity condition. Well, trivially, I agree
Yeah.
with that, and I'm just going to say, well, I may not be someone who could reason prime, and I don't really care to be. But if you're going to say
Yeah.
you're someone who can reason, then you have the conformity condition. Well, I just going to want to see the argument for that, because that seems like a huge leap. That and I don't think any deduction is going to be successful there. At least, well, that's at least if I had to bet on it. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah. And I accept that. I accept that it seems weird, right? Like that's sort of what the whole, at least the whole
Not just
classical
that it's
project of
weird, it's that
ethics
like
is.
my pride. It's just like
Yeah.
my pride based on like my experiences of
Yeah.
deduction
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be. It's difficult to see how it would work, which is like that's why Kant took himself to have had such a great achievement in making it work, right? Whether or not he was successful, you know, that was yeah, that is, I think, the difficulty that I would accept, right? So that's the kind of burden that I have. So I'm happy to accept that burden. Um, I'm not gonna fulfill it here, obviously, but yeah, good.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think we both understand the task at least, of
Yeah, there's
like
two. There's
what it
two.
would take.
To be clear. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's two tasks. One
Yeah.
one is if you care to resolve the main issue, which is um
Which is the circle, which is
or,
the
or the or the infinite. Yeah, and then the other
yeah
thing is to yeah, the other thing is to actually provide an argument for why I have any reason to believe that I'm a member of this natural kind
yeah
thing. And if I am, that these things are, provided that the natural kind has these things that you say that are entailed on, like that I have the
mm,
conformity or something.
yeah yeah great. Okay, good. That is the task. I'm glad that we've resolved that. I think uh
And just keep in
yeah
mind when you try to solve the task, just keep in mind what like because there's been a theme
yeah
of
well
like responses that come
yeah
up again and again and again. Just try to apply those types of responses to things you come up with.
yeah, of course. That's part of what I think has been valuable in this exchange, is that now I understand better than I did what the kind of dialectical loops are here that I'll need to break. So that's very useful. Thank you. Um, right. I think I don't know. What would be a good place to like post thoughts about this? The philosophy channel, perhaps, because I think better in writing than on my feet for certain purposes. And I think this is one of those purposes. So I might want to like post things
Oh,
in
this is
intermittent
Isaac's server.
sections
That
of
would
the
be
book.
his. Um, I'm sure, like maybe in one of the
Oh,
channels. Or
yeah. I mean, you can post a philosophy channel, but and there's some of the people who are good at philosophy and have similar views to Avi and I will probably communicate in there. Like Troy might talk a bit. Lance is pretty talkative. Lance is good to help. You could join Lance's server actually. He's like more involved in this topic than Avi or I. Like Avi's a doctor. He doesn't. This isn't like
Yeah,
his main
sure.
area or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I obviously don't do this like full time or something. I'm like a student, so
Yeah, no, no
Lance is a
worries. I
moral
mean,
philosophy.
it's not my full time. It's not my full time occupation,
but
occupation
but
either.
he,
I'm
no,
a metaphysician.
well, yeah, that's on you. But
Yeah,
as for Avi and I, like unfortunately, we are just both people who have like very low text tolerance. It just seems like this conversation on text would have been like years. Like this would have
yeah,
just been
perhaps.
completely insane. So I mean,
Yeah,
I do feel bad when there's an impasse and someone's like, I think best in text, but like I
yeah,
can't do the text. I don't
yeah.
think Avi is
yeah,
like very text
that's fine. I'm
Don't
not.
tag
Yeah,
me. Don't tag me or anything when you do this text thing.
you
no.
can force Avi to
Yeah,
engage in text by paying him though. He has a Patreon inbox and the money goes towards funding
yeah.
vegan
Well,
studies.
that's fine. That's fine.
So you can use that if you really want
Uh,
Avi's
yeah.
opinion.
Anyway, it's still an interesting problem, and I'm glad you've raised it. I haven't encountered it too habitually well, I haven't encountered it at all actually. So I'm glad to have encountered a new issue with my thoughts. So yeah, anyway, thanks guys. I think that's about it, unless we want to talk about something else.
No, man. Thanks for having that chat. It's good having you there.
Yeah,
And yeah, talk to
no
like
worries.
Troy or Lance if you're doing text, because both of them
Yeah,
will like they'll give you the same thing Avi and I gave you. I bet you anything they'll find the same general issue. We all think about this like pretty similarly.
yeah. I think I've talked to Lance a little bit, but anyway, yeah. Thanks, guys. Yeah, it's more than I thought I was in for with an afternoon of trolling.
I
All right.
had to make a non-shit conversation happen after that random Nazi guy.
Well, I'm glad you consider that a non-shit conversation.
Well, I mean,
I
to
thought
be
it was.
fair,
It's
I
not
thought it was.
follow
saying
you
much,
weren't
but
exactly following a hard act there, but yeah. Have a good night, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. No worries.